The 1800RESPECT logo appears, the National Sexual Assault Domestic Family Violence Counselling Service. Underneath are 3 images of women in counselling situations. Text reads, "The information presented in this webinar is of a general nature and is not a substitute for legal or other professional advice. The views expressed in this presentation do not necessarily represent the views of the Australian Government or MHS. While all reasonable care has been taken in the preparation of this presentation, no liability is assumed for any errors or omissions." The Westnet logo appears. Some text appears. Responding is everyone's business.
Hello everyone, and welcome to today's 1800RESPECT webinar about technology-facilitated abuse, understanding the issues and how frontline workers can improve the safety of women. I'm Kelly Brown from 1800RESPECT. 1800RESPECT is the National Sexual Assault, Domestic and Family Violence Counselling Service. The service provides support for anyone impacted by sexual assault, domestic or family violence, including frontline workers that are seeking information, advice or support. Before we start today, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present. We thank you for taking part today and for your commitment to improving the safety and support of women and children across Australia. 1800RESPECT is pleased to partner with Westnet on this webinar. While technologies can provide a very valuable, flexible link to family, friends and support services for women experiencing domestic and family violence, they can also become a tool for an abuser to harass, control, monitor and humiliate an intimate partner or ex-partner. At the end of this webinar, we will provide you some information about some exciting new 1800RESPECT resources that can support frontline workers and women to increase their safety when using digital technology. These resources will be made available in the 2016 1800RESPECT Frontline Workers Toolkit that will be launched on the 25th of November as part of the 16 Days of Action. So stay tuned for more information about that and sign up on our homepage of the website to our newsletter or download our toolkit to make sure that you receive these resources. Please note that today's webinar is live and it's interactive, and throughout the webinar we encourage you to actively participate by using or typing into the chat box that is on the bottom left-hand corner located to the right of the cogwheel. We'll try to answer as many of your questions at the end of the webinar as possible. If you're experiencing difficulty with the sound during the webinar, please use the chat box or dial the 1800RESPECT support number that's listed below. So finally now, we are very pleased to welcome our presenter for today, Karen Bentley.
A live web feed of Karen Bentley appears.
Our presenter, Karen, is the National Director for the Westnet Safety Net Australia project. There she is on screen now, giving a little wave. Karen delivers technology safety training to Australian agencies and organisations that work with women experiencing or escaping gender-based violence and stalking. She's been working with the violence against women sector since 1998 in various positions and roles at the federal government, national, state and grassroots agency levels. I'd now like to pass over to Karen to begin. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Kelly, and thanks for that introduction. So, hello everyone, and shortly I'm going to just pop off the screen as I start the webinar. And I'd also like to acknowledge the elders, past and present, of all the lands that we're on today. As Kelly said, I'm the National Director of the Safety Net Australia project, and today we're going to be doing a very quick run-through. We're going to give you a brief overview of some of the common ways that frontline services are seeing technology-facilitated abuse with their clients. I have to say this is a really huge topic and we're really only going to scratch the surface today, but at the end of this webinar I'd really like you to be able to leave and have a better understanding of how technology is being misused by perpetrators, how you can best support your clients when they're experiencing it, and what ways that women can use technology to actually collect evidence and hold perpetrators accountable. And at the end, we'll also give you some useful resources and links to other organisations that can support you and your clients, and that will, and then of course we have the 1800RESPECT Frontline Agency Kit, which will be a great resource.
A slide states that Safety Net Australia training has been adapted by Westnet for Australia under licence from curriculum by the Safety Net Project at the National Network to End Domestic Violence. The web address is www.nnedv.org. Logos for Westnet and the NNEDV appear to the side.
I do need to let you, so Safety Net Australia, we've been up and running since 2011, and we work with the National Network to End Domestic Violence, which is our US-based sister agency. And they've been working in this space since 2002, and they've trained over 90,000 domestic violence workers, police, prosecutors and others. So we use their curriculum here in Australia, and we've adapted it for the Australian use. So it's great to have that resource there. WESNET is the national peak advocacy body in Australia for domestic and family violence services, and we've got about 350 members around Australia, which is made up of women's shelters, refuges, safe houses, outreach services, legal, housing and homelessness services, and things like information and referral services. We provide high-level advice to governments and other decision makers, and we are also the lead agency for the Australian Women Against Violence Alliance. So just before we begin, just wanted to make sure that we go through our understanding of domestic and family violence so that we're all on the same page. So we understand domestic violence or domestic and family violence to be more than physical violence. It also includes sexual, emotional, financial, spiritual and cultural, and now we say technological abuse. These are all tactics of coercive power and control, and they're often used together by the abuser to have control and power over his victim. We understand domestic and family violence against women to be a gendered issue and with huge human and economic costs to individuals, communities and society. We know that one woman every week is killed by their current or former partner, and that the vast majority of acts, whether against men or women, are perpetrated by men. But regardless of gender, violence against anyone is unacceptable, and it's devastating to anybody who's subjected to it. And so while we recognise and acknowledge that men are also victims of violence and that women can perpetrate violence, today's presentation is targeted to prevent technology-facilitated violence against women and their children. So I'll move on from there.
Logos appear for the Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria, SmartSafe, Technology Abuse and Your Safety, and the Australian Communications Consumer Action Network.
So how much of a problem is this? And we're very lucky in Australia to have had a project that recently looked at this. So WESNET, Women's Legal Services New South Wales and DVRVCV collaborated last year on a project called Recharge, which was funded by ACAN. And the Domestic Violence Resource Centre in Victoria undertook a survey of 546 domestic violence practitioners, and it found that 98% of those practitioners had supported clients who had experienced tech abuse. And this is similar to results that they found in a previous 2013 survey, and it's also what's being found in the United States. And late last year, the Federal Attorney General Cybercrime Working Group stated that there's now an almost universal overlap between domestic violence and technology abuse. The four most common types of technology that are used in Australia to threaten, harm or stalk women are texting, Facebook, email and GPS location tracking. At WESNET, we're increasingly called by support workers across the country for advice regarding women's the women that you are all supporting, and men are turning up metres away from refuges. We know that women are experiencing multiple forms of abuse, and it can be online and offline, and they feel like there is no escape. One recent article described it as tethering of women. Women feel like it's 24 hours a day and they are forever looking over their shoulder with no escape or relief possible.
A cartoon shows a boxing glove coming out of a computer, striking a woman on the nose.
So there are many different ways to categorise technology-facilitated abuse, but one way to look at it is falling generally into these four categories. So harassment, which is basically using technology to annoy, abuse, harass or intimidate. It could be by phone, it could be by text message, email, instant message or some other means. The second way is monitoring and stalking.
A smartphone indicates the location of an individual.
So this is generally about somebody accessing a person's technology, either physically or remotely, to learn or know about what they're doing and what their activities are. It could also be using location technology to track somebody's physical location. The third category is impersonation.
A man is shown with his identity concealed by a covering over his eyes.
So this is where people pretend to be somebody else as a tactic of further abuse. So they might impersonate somebody to pretend to be someone else and to cause harm or ruin a reputation or damage relationships. Or they might impersonate somebody to stop access to services.
2 cameras are shown behind a sign that says revenge porn.
And the fourth area is threats and punishment. So that might be threatening to harm or threatening to humiliate. For example, by posting naked images, if she ever leaves, is a very common tactic of abusers to prevent a woman from leaving a violent situation. And there can also be an element of punishment, so where abusers log into people's accounts, change their passwords and prevent them from having access to either government portals, online accounts, emails or bank accounts. Could we have the first poll now? So I just thought I'd ask all of you what types of abuse you're seeing in your clients. So as we can see, text messaging is quite popular, as is Facebook and location tracking, and this really mimics and is consistent with the findings of the Australian survey that was carried out in 2015.
A woman's hand is shown holding a smartphone.
Before we do move on, it's really essential, and one of the main points that I'd like for you to take away from the webinar is that it's really essential for women to continue to use technology, but we just want to promote the safest way for them to use it. So how many of you have heard of someone complaining about being harassed on Facebook and then heard someone else advise them to just get off Facebook? We hear it all the time. It's the same old story, which is that the responsibility is placed on the victim to avoid the abuse rather than the abuser being held accountable. And with technology, this can mean that women basically have to get off technology or stop using the technology. But it shouldn't really have to be the answer. And we already know that if you're experiencing domestic or family violence, it's got devastating impacts on women and their children in terms of their financial, emotional and general well-being. And asking these women to also get off technology is just a further punishment. And it's very difficult now to live in Australia and not have access to technology. And in fact, the UN has passed a non-binding resolution in June this year to say that it's now a human rights violation to take internet access away. It's really not practical for women to have to give up technology. There are too many things you cannot do if you don't have access to the internet. Trying to claim for Medicare or government benefits without access to technology is extremely difficult. It's also important for women who are in abusive situations to have access to support and services. And if things get worse or that things get particularly violent, technology or a phone might be the only way she can actually reach out and get help. The other really good thing about technology is it can be used to gather evidence against the perpetrators. So this is something we want to really focus on. We need to turn the tables on asking women to get off technology. We need to stop telling them that they should get off it, and it's not the technology that's the problem, it's actually the person who's misusing the technology to abuse. We basically say this is old behaviour with new tools. So emerging technology abuse is now well and truly emerged in Australia, and we've seen that over the last 5 years or so, and it's increasingly being used against women. So it's really important to harness technology to promote safety, and it can be used, as I said, to gather evidence against perpetrators. Safety planning around technology should be individual and specific, and technology can absolutely help with information and achieving safety. We're not saying either that women experiencing technology abuse should stay on every single bit of technology, or no matter what. We need to actually do this sort of in a planned and risk assessment manner. There will be times when it might be safer for her to be temporarily off certain devices or applications, but we don't want that to be a long-term arrangement. Basically, there is a gender divide again in technology, and we need women to have full and safe access to technology, because punishing them by making them get off it is really not going to help the situation. Okay, so today, because we've got limited time, we're really going to focus mostly on mobile phones, and there's a particular reason why we focus on mobile phones, and that is because your phone has more computing power now than all of NASA did in 1969. So it's amazing what you can actually do. So when we first started doing this training in 2011, we actually did separate training modules on computers and phones. But now we find that they're merging, and what applies to computers also applies to smartphones. We can do so much more on a smartphone than we used to be able to, and a smartphone can pretty much do anything a computer can do, and sometimes it can do more. So if you think about your use of smartphones, you make phone calls, you do texts, you read your email, listen to music, check your Facebook, check the weather, read the newspaper, watch videos, take photos, the list just goes on. There are all sorts of things that we can do using a smartphone today. So thinking about the ways that phones can be abused, it really ranges from simple right through to incredibly complex. So starting at the simple end, it might just be as simple as receiving an abusive phone call, or multiple phone calls or multiple texts. And one of the most common ways is just to ring them up, as for perpetrators, just ring up and verbally abuse their victims. And text messages, as I mentioned before, is one of the most common ways that we're hearing about technology abuse. He could just monitor, so each night the perpetrator might just get access to her phone and read through what she's been doing. He might manipulate her phone features. So we've heard of cases where phones have been redirected to another number so that she doesn't receive any phone calls at all. We know that mobile phones can easily be used as listening devices, and we've had a case a few years ago where a client found a mobile phone in her bed base, and another who found a phone in the wall cavity of her room connected to the power. We know also that phones can be used for spying with spyware. In the case of the phone in the wall, the perpetrator had just set it to silent, and he presumably rang in whenever he wanted to hear what was happening in the bedroom. So, and with spyware, I'll come to that in a minute. But let's just go back to text messaging for a minute, because it's the most common way that we're hearing about technology abuse happening. And there are lots of different ways now, apart from just sending the normal SMS or MMS on your phone. So here are 3 different ways. You can send messages through device-specific applications, so things like iMessage or BB Message. Apps like WhatsApp, Viber, Snapchat and Signal are types of apps that you can now download. They don't have any charge, and you can send send messages through those. And then there's a whole range of messaging apps through social media platforms. So Messenger from Facebook is probably the 3rd or 4th most popular social media platform in the world at the moment, and that is just basically around sending text messages. So lots of different ways to send texts. And this means that sometimes it's easier for messages to be faked or falsified, spoofed, which is where somebody sends a text message but it looks like it's come from somebody else, or they can be sent anonymously via a website or a virtual text messaging service. So it's worth having that in mind, or being aware of that if your clients are experiencing text messaging abuse, but you can't tell where it's coming from. And some of the apps have actually evolved to try and make evidence collection a little bit harder. They're also designed to try and increase people's privacy. So we've got apps like TigerText, Snapchat and WhatsApp, where the messages actually self-destruct and disappear. And of course we've had a range of other apps which have developed in concert with that to try and stop that from happening, so that you can't hide them, but they are all there and aware. So lots of different ways to send text. And if your clients are experiencing text messaging abuse, here are some things that you can get them to do. So it's important to get them to document the threatening or harassing calls or messages. So with the messages or text messages, you can get them to take a screenshot, and there are lots of videos on the websites around like e-safety for women that can tell you to do that. If she's really being harassed and she just needs to have a break from that, she might consider blocking his number temporarily, although that may not stop the abuse from happening. She might consider getting a new phone, or she might use a virtual phone number to avoid having to talk to him on a particular phone. If she is going to get a new phone, she needs to be a bit strategic when she's creating a new account or linking them to current email accounts, because if the abuser's also on the account, it may provide him with access to the new phone number. So, for example, if you get a new prepaid service, you need to ensure that your contact details with the phone provider, say for example Telstra, are up to date. So we've had cases where women have got a new account but they haven't updated their details, and so they have a new number, but then the perpetrator is notified immediately because he's on the contact details, and the information is just sent straight through to him. So documenting is really important, and we'll come back to that a bit later on about why. So let's just move on quickly now to the sort of really complicated end of mobile phone technology abuse, and that's where we have spyware or monitoring software installed on phones. So spyware for mobile phones or smartphones is very similar in what it can do compared to what it does on a desktop or a computer. It can track location using the GPS features of the phone. You can monitor all calls, texts and messages that go in and out of the phone. You can dial up or ring into it and record or listen to all the calls. Some of the spyware apps have got things where when you receive an incoming call, it also rings on the phone that's monitoring your phone at the same time, so you can live intercept phone calls. It records all the websites that are visited. It can take a screenshot of everything that's happening on the phone every second and keep a store of that so that the perpetrator can just browse through what's happening. And you can access everything on the phone. So that's all the photos, all the contacts, all the emails, everything on the phone. It's basically like having complete access to the phone while not having the phone. Software at the moment, generally you still require physical access to the phone to install spyware, or you need to have clicked on a link or accepted some kind of invitation by text or email to then install the software. So it requires the owner of the phone or the person on the phone to actually take some steps to have it installed. However, that is starting to look like it will change soon, because the spyware companies that are developing this app, and recently, it was in late August, there was an app developed by a hacker that was designed to infect an iPhone by stealth. Apple's fixed that up for the time being, but I don't think it will be very long before we will see that spyware is being installed remotely. The thing about spyware is it's extremely difficult to detect. So here are some of the ways that your clients might be able to, or things they might notice. You'll potentially see unusual battery drain on the phone, so the phone drains of battery much more quickly, and typically you'll also see spikes in data usage. So they're the two main things. The reason for the spike in data usage is because everything on the phone's been replicated. So what you'll generally see is a pattern where the data use has been a certain amount, and then it will double. So you'll see a point that the spyware is installed on the phone, the data usage will definitely double. You might find things like the phone takes a lot longer to shut down because, of course, the spyware might have remote access, so it can turn on and turn off the phone remotely. The screen might light up when it's not being used. People might hear clicks or sounds when they're on the call if they're being intercepted, so you'll actually hear background noise, or you might hear strange clicks and electrical sounds. The main way is that the abuser seems to know stuff around what's going on with his victim that he could only know if he had access to the phone. And if the perpetrator has had physical access to the phone, that might be another thing. So older phones, of course, do have battery drain that goes a lot faster, so that's not in itself a reason to suspect that you've got spyware on your phone. You really usually have to have a range of these types of things happening before you can sort of jump to the conclusion that there's spyware on the phone. But that spike in data usage, and the abuser uses this to basically threaten, intimidate or scare their victim, so they usually let slip some tips or hints that they know things that they shouldn't know. So if you do have a client who thinks that she might have spyware, it's pretty important to trust the survivor's instinct. A lot of times victims of technology abuse will seek support from other services and they basically won't be believed. It's important to try and narrow down the options to try and identify what could be happening. If it is actually hard to work out whether it is spyware, it could actually be something else on the phone that's not spyware that is revealing or making it possible for, say, a perpetrator to track her location or understand what's going on. It might be important, if she does think that her phone is compromised, for her to strategically use other options for safety. And that might be using a safer phone or using a safer device, one that she thinks is not compromised. So using a safer phone or a phone that's not her mobile phone or not in her house might be a better option than continuing to use her phone. If she does get a new phone, she needs to be quite careful about transferring content from an old phone to a new phone in case something like spyware is installed and that just gets transferred from the old phone to the new phone. And as I said before, it's really important to update contact details before you activate a new prepaid account so that you don't inadvertently alert the perpetrator who might have been on the same account in the past that there is a new number. And the other really important thing here is for women who do get a new phone or try to use a safe phone, that they don't use the new phone around the old phone, because the phone that is compromised, if it does have spyware on it, can have the mic opened and it can just listen to everything that's going on in the room where that phone is. So very often we hear about women who've got a new phone, but they're on the new phone talking or talking to mum or sister and saying, I've got a new phone, here's my new number. And of course the perpetrator is listening on the old phone, which she happens to have in the same location. So a safe tip for that is to wrap it up in a jumper or leave it in a separate room if she is going to use a new phone. I can't stress enough that if she thinks she's being monitored in some way, then she probably is. Trying to work out how might be the thing that's a bit harder. So it's really important to think very carefully before you remove the technology. And that's because if the perpetrator is monitoring her remotely at a distance, particularly if she's in a separate location or has left the relationship, that's one thing. But if you remove that remote monitoring device or ability for him to monitor where she is, he may turn up in person, and that could be a much worse scenario for her. So thinking very carefully before you remove any type of tracking or surveillance device or anything where he might be monitoring or what she's doing, because it may escalate the violence. And the second reason, and another very important reason, is that if you suddenly get rid of a mobile phone, ditch it, delete it, or you get rid of an app, you may actually be destroying the evidence. So that might be something that's really crucial if things escalate and it needs to go to court. So always, if she's documenting stuff, so if she's taking screenshots of the text messages, if you're doing that, for example, in the WhatsApp app, it tells you that somebody else is taking a screenshot. So she needs to think about what will happen if the perpetrator knows that she's documenting what's happening. How does the actual technology inform the perpetrator what's going on? So just thinking very carefully and having a safety plan before actually removing technology. It may be safer for her to keep a compromised phone but limit what she says on that phone and use a safer phone than suddenly, freaking out about the phone and ditching it altogether. And this is probably a good point to tell you about the Telstra Safe Connections program. So Telstra's actually donated 20,000 smartphones to WESNET to distribute to women who are experiencing domestic violence who need a safer phone, and it comes with $30 prepaid credit. And we will also come and train local agencies who are the distributing agencies about technology abuse and how to hand over phones safely to women. So that is a great new initiative that we are just starting with. I'll give you more information about that at the end. So moving on to location, which is another aspect of smartphones that's really intrinsic. So smartphones can track our location without us even knowing it. This is a great feature on smartphones, and it helps us in many ways, from basic GPS, but it's also increasingly a problem for women.
A phone screen shows the location services page and various apps next to their individual on-off switches for accessing those functions.
So some apps collect information and they need location information to operate. But it's really important to have a look at those types of all the apps and have a look at what location settings are turned on. Most apps will ask you permission about whether or not they're going to record your location. But the other thing about location tracking is it's not always apps. It could actually just be that it's a phone that's handed to a child and that has location. The parent then accesses contact details to locate and so that. So it's not always a location feature, but smartphones can still be used. The other thing to be aware of is things called like accidentally sharing, so geotagging. So location can be added to pictures that are taken with phones, and if you upload those to some forms of social media, it might actually reveal a location of the woman if she's sharing photos through social media. I should just say that Facebook currently strips that data, so it might be safer for a woman who's in a secret location to send photos up through Facebook rather than directly, because they will still have data in them. The safety tips around this are for a woman to turn off the location services in her mobile devices setting if she thinks it's safe to do so. So if she's trying to stay hidden, that would be very important for her. But if she's in a current relationship and he is monitoring her whereabouts, it may not be safe for her to turn that off. You can turn off the geotagging for photos in the settings of most smartphones, and you can control which apps access your location. It's probably a good idea to actually decline the location access on most apps unless you absolutely need it to do it. So obviously a map app would need to have location turned on, but there are all sorts of other apps that ask for your location details and they don't have any reason to have it. Working out location tracking can be quite tricky. So is it because of the phone if she's being tracked, or has he got access to the phone? Has he got some other access to an account that tells him where she is? Asking a client to leave her phone behind or turn it off might not actually be realistic. That might be the only way that she can actually get help or call 000 if she needs it. So you need to weigh the privacy versus safety risks with mobiles and location. You also need to talk to your clients about their children's use of mobile phones. Quite often children are given devices, Apple or other devices, by the non-resident parent so that they can communicate, and they are often misused to track. And if it's not the phone, you might actually need to start thinking about what else might be tracked. Is it the car? Is it another tracking app or another device? Or is it something as simple as Facebook tagging by a friend? Social media. So we'll just quickly go through some of the social media things. So almost everyone is using social media today, including clients, victims and abusers. And many users don't understand the privacy options of social media sites. So pictures and information are frequently posted on sites, and they're often used against people in court cases by employers, future employees, when doing things like job applications. So many social media sites are collecting all sorts of information about users. And the ways in which they can be misused is that abusers can monitor victims' pages, they can set up whole new fake profiles, they can hijack those pages and embarrass, harass, or basically wreck relationships. Quite often we hear about people friending the victim's friends and family. They can gather information about what they're doing on social media, but also through search engines. And they also can use social media to post really horrible, naked or harmful images, which is often colloquially known as revenge porn. We know that this is happening quite a lot, so that DVRCV survey found that nearly 2/3 of the practitioners felt that social media was being used to make threats, and it was frequently done via friends and families. And nearly half the practitioners had clients who had perpetrators threatening to distribute or post private photos. So there's a lot of threats made, particularly to distribute sexualised images through them. Again, giving up social networks shouldn't be the solution. Talk to the clients about their settings, their privacy and security settings. Talk to them about their use and their children's use of all online spaces, not just the major social working sites. There are all sorts of sites where they could be accidentally or unwittingly revealing information. The interconnectedness of the online world, so we have the same email address, often we have the same password, you use Facebook to log into all sorts of different types of programs and apps, and so where one is connected to the other. And avoiding the internet's really not possible, but having better privacy and safety is. So teaching your clients about how to keep their privacy and safety settings up to speed and keeping those software updates is really important. If you do have clients who are experiencing abuse through either Twitter or Facebook, these are fabulous guides. So, I can use a pen, but we have these brilliant guides from the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And one is on Facebook and one of them is on Twitter. And these are available through our website, and I'll give you that address at the end. And we've also got a safety planning booklet that goes through a whole range of different types of online and technology abuse that you can purchase from our website. If the client is experiencing abuse, document again what's happening. Try and keep a log of what's happening to establish a pattern. If there's stalking behaviour, it's illegal to stalk in all states and territories in Australia. Taking screenshots using either on the computer or the phone. If you can't do that, take photographs of what's happening on the social media. Printing out the pages, keeping a separate copy in a different location would be useful. And also remembering not to delete emails, text messages or voicemails if they have got abuse. You can also record either abusive phone calls or conversations if that's legal to do so. There are some issues around that. Queensland, it's no problem, but for other states in Australia, there are some issues around recording. Most people can use that as evidence, though, if they need to. On social media sites, most sites have got rules about what's allowed on their sites, and there are always some kind of reporting capacity. Well, for most sites, there are some sites which are a bit shady that do not have that, but most genuine social media sites will have a way of removing or reporting unsavoury or abusive, harassing or threatening posts. So have a look at those. Most sites have got some kind of notice and takedown procedures. In Australia, if you have a client who's under 18 who's experiencing cyberbullying or some kind of sexual abuse online, you can go through to the Office of the Children's E-Safety Commissioner. That's really fabulous. They can help you take things down. You do need to report make a report using the social media platform and wait 48 hours, and then after that you can report it to the E-Safety Commissioner, and they will try and take it down if they think it is, consider it to be a cyberbullying or child sexual abuse online. If you're over 18 and you're experiencing serious abuse online, there is also the Australia Cybercrime Online Reporting Network. This is really more related to cybercrime, but it is currently the only real avenue with government in terms of over 18s. Again, if you are taking stuff down off social media, remember that the abuser might know if it gets removed, so it might escalate him. Removing the post might stop the abuse from happening, but will it escalate the situation? So just thinking about what happens if those social posts get removed or thwarted. Removing posts, particularly in the case of revenge porn, from one site will not necessarily guarantee it's removed from all. Some of these just grow like crazy. So once it hits one, for example, revenge porn site, it just spreads across the whole internet. And also remember that removing content might also remove the evidence. So try to document or get her to document every instance of that abuse online before she goes to remove it. It's really important because once it's gone, it's very difficult to get back. And remember that blocking doesn't actually remove the content. So with safety planning for your clients, I know we've run through that very quickly. So we've run through phones, location tracking and social media. There's no simple checklist. It really is about risk management, and what's safe for her can change really quickly. So it's exactly the same as safety planning in real life. You just need to have a think about what you're doing or what you're advising your client, and let her try to help and think about what she needs to do or what she'd like to do to try and increase her safety, and be prepared to sort of change that if things start to escalate. Trying to give the client some choice around this is really important, because she's, obviously the abuser often uses technology abuse to try and control and keep power over. So trying to give that client back some control and back some power is really important, rather than doing a blanket, right, get off the technology. And try to give the clients tools and strategies so that they can manage their own risk and safety. It's really important. So the things around technology abuse is that it can really heighten fears and misunderstandings. It's quite difficult sometimes to work out how the technology abuse has happened. Sometimes it's obvious, you're getting 50 text messages a minute, but sometimes it's really hard to work out how the technology is being misused, or how she's being tracked, or how he's finding out information he shouldn't have. It's also really minimised. So when women go to the police or report this, they're often told it's in your head. That can't really be happening. So it's very easy for people to experience tech abuse as not happening or in your head. And the perpetrators can be very clever about how they sort of mess with people's heads by doing strange things, so it doesn't look like on the surface anything's happening. It's really hard to sometimes identify which technology is causing the problem. So trying to sit down and systematically work out what's happening and how it might be happening is a good way to go. And that said, even though technology can be misused, it also can be used for good. So we mustn't forget that we can turn the tables and actually start using technology to collect the evidence, and also that women can get support and access to services when they previously couldn't. So technology is that. So where do you start? You have to think about what's happening. So is it just lots of text messages being abusive, or does he keep turning up where she is, so he keeps finding her? What does he know? Does he know the content of an email? Does he know the content of a conversation that was had on the phone? Or does he just know that the conversation or the email was sent? So what does he know? And that can help you identify how the technology is being used. What kind of access does he have to her technology? Has he had access to her home? Is he currently co-located with her and has access to a shared computer? Does he have access to her phone or not? That can also help you work out what type of technology. The other thing is it technologically possible? And that's hard to work out sometimes, and we hear of some very interesting sort of cases where people say, he walked past me and there was spyware on my phone, but that may not actually be technologically possible. Might be tomorrow, but today it's not. So actually working out what's actually technologically possible is something to also keep in mind. And we also highly recommend trying to keep it simple. Don't jump to conclusions that it's always spyware on the phone. It might be something really simple, like somebody's tagged your face or your photo on Facebook and that's revealed your location.
A meme appears saying, "Keep calm and love technology."
Getting rid of technology is not the answer. She might need to get off it temporarily, but just wholesale telling women to get off technology is not what we're trying to support. We want women to be on technology, use it to get access to support and services, be able to reach out for help, and also collect evidence. So in the last few minutes, I just want to walk through some support and resources. We're working with Telstra, and if you are interested in the phones, the smartphones for women, it's www.wesnet.org.au/phones.
A slide reads, Westnet is working with Telstra and the federal government to provide safe phones to women experiencing violence. If your organisation is interested in becoming a distributor for safe phones and receiving in-depth training around technology abuse, please visit our website at www.wesnet.org.au/phones. Logos for Telstra and the Department of Social Services, Australian Government appear.
That's a great initiative. Please visit our website for that.
Logos for SmartSafe and the Women's Legal Service New South Wales appear.
There are a range of legal guides which actually go through all the different types of legislation for each state and territory in Australia, and they're available on the smartsafe.org.au website under legal guides. There are 3 sets of guides for every state and territory in Australia, and they give you an overview of relevant legislation in your state for surveillance, other criminal offences and intervention or domestic violence prevention orders.
A screenshot from the website says, empowering women to take control online, and shows a woman in her kitchen holding a teacup and saucer.
There's also e-safety women training and a website. So the Office of the Children's E-Safety Commissioner is rolling out free 2-hour training on keeping women safe online. That's available through their website, and their website also has a whole range of resources on how to change settings on mobile phones and smartphones and other devices, which is a great resource. We're hosting the inaugural Technology Safety Summit in Sydney on the 21st of November, and that will bring together domestic violence sector, legal, justice, police, government, corporate and technology companies to talk about the latest emerging issues in technology safety in Australia. And we have a whole range of handouts on our website at wesnet.org.au/safetynet. So there are safety net handouts for workers and also for clients who might be experiencing technology facilitated abuse. And now I'm okay for questions.
Wonderful, Karen. Thank you for that presentation. And we have had lots of questions come through, so I might jump straight.
I did go over time a bit.
That's all right. We'll have to. We clearly won't get to all of them, but I'll just jump straight to a few of them right now.
Mm-hmm.
Can Telstra shops assist with identifying and removing tracking devices on the client phones?
Look, I think some Telstra shops might be able to do that, but it's going to be pretty variable, and we know that we certainly haven't trained Telstra frontline staff about this issue, and they're certainly not going to necessarily understand some of the dynamics in domestic and family violence. So we don't I think it will be mixed. You could try, but we're not sure that they would all be able to do it. And I think that's part of the reason that Telstra's donated 20,000 smartphones to Wesnet, because they want us to distribute those phones through frontline agencies where women can actually get support from domestic violence workers to do some safety planning, and that we can train the frontline workers on how to give a woman a new phone more safely. That's a lot easier than trying to identify whether a phone's compromised.
Great. And if someone wants to refer a woman for one of those phones, how would you find out where they could go to get one of those?
You can. We're rolling out phase 2 of this now, so we're looking for any frontline agency to come and sign on and be a distributing agency. So you can either sign on and become one. We'll send you the phones. You can give them to your clients, or otherwise you ring 1800RESPECT and we will try and find the nearest distributing agency to you.
Great. What role do or should social media companies play in maximising gendered safety online?
I think this is a really topical issue, and we're really pleased to see, certainly 4 years ago, I don't think any of the social media companies were doing anything much about this particular issue, but it's really starting to gather some speed. And we know that our sister agency in the United States had a lot of success with working with Facebook and Twitter. So that's why we now have those guides for survivors of domestic and family violence. So they're really aware of it, and they are working with our sister agency in the United States to try and really tackle this particular issue. And we're also starting to see some of the big social media giants taking this more seriously as well. So I noticed 2 days ago Instagram has just rolled out a new feature where it enables people to filter out comments using block lists, and that's the first time that's happened. Twitter's also doing quite a lot in terms of trying to stop hate speech. And we also know that Google, for example, has banned or stopped displaying sites which host revenge porn. So you can't find revenge porn sites on Google. So they do have a big role to play. They are starting to listen. There's a lot more work to do, but I think that they will have to play a really big role in trying to deal with this issue.
Wonderful. Someone has asked, given the large use of social media, what would you recommend as a software safeguard to protect against abuse through technology?
Oh, look, there's no one magic piece of software that's going to protect somebody from technology abuse. It's just too big. Mind you, if anybody knows of anybody developing that, let me know, because I'd like to buy shares. It would be amazing. Look, there's no one fixed answer for anything to do with technology abuse, but there are really sensible things you can do. So the main thing is around your privacy and security settings and making sure that you've got those software or those media apps on your phone, apps on your computer up to date so that it's the latest version, because they're constantly blocking some of those security holes. And you can control who accesses your account and who sees your content through those two privacy and security settings.
Great.
Also, having a really strong password is the other thing that I would say, because most things are hacked or accessed by having weak passwords.
Right, okay. And I think we're going to have to come up to our final couple of questions, but what legal protections exist for women who experience abuse through technology?
Look, it's the same for online or technology abuse as it is for abuse that happens in real life or in day-to-day. So we've got stalking laws in every state and territory in Australia. So if people are being stalked, there are stalking laws. So documenting the evidence and you know, the fact that it's happened more than once and that you're fearful is available as an option. We also have a whole range of criminal crimes in Australia. So there's crimes in relation to surveilling, so listening devices, monitoring, installing spyware are all illegal. The main way that we deal with domestic family violence, of course, is through intervention orders or domestic violence restraining orders. And there are ways and language that you can include in some of those in some states and territories, because of course some have got mandatory text in them that might be able to include technology. But for anybody who's interested in legal issues around this issue, please go to the smartsafe.org.au website and look up the legal guides, because they're a fabulous resource that was created by the Women's Legal Service New South Wales, and they're specific to technology abuse and the legislation in this country. It's got a little way to go, but these are a great new start in terms of you understanding as a worker what legislation is currently there that you might be able to advise your client. And sometimes it's really good to be able to go to the police and say, this is a threat over a carriage service, and this is the piece of legislation that they're breaching.
Wonderful. Thanks, Karen. I think we might have to move on to wrapping up now, but thank you for those questions and answers.
The Daisy app logo appears. Daisy, connecting women.
I'd like to now just bring to everybody's attention that the next webinar, which will be held in November, will be about vicarious trauma and looking after yourself if you're a frontline worker. The date's to be confirmed, but if you subscribe either through the homepage of our website, down the bottom is the subscribe function, or if you download our toolkit at 1800respect.org.au/toolkit, we will endeavour to keep you informed of upcoming webinars. As I said earlier, we are coming up to the 16 days of action in November, and we'll be releasing a range of different resources, including some new tech safety resources. So we recommend that you download the toolkit as a key way of ensuring that you get those updates during the 16 days of action. I'd also like to bring your attention to Daisy, which is an app that 1800RESPECT has developed to help connect women and frontline workers, as well as family and friends, to local support services, either services in their regional or local area.
Text reads, if you are an organisation or frontline worker interested in information about the 1800RESPECT Frontline Workers campaign during the 16 days of action, please sign up to our newsletter via our website or send an email to info@1800respect.org.au.
Finally, I'd like to now thank you for attending and contributing to today's webinar. If you stay logged in, you can take our online survey. The survey button is located in the bottom right-hand corner. We really appreciate your feedback, and thank you again for attending, and have a pleasant afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.